In a world full of monsters, giants, fishmen, minks, all with incredibly impressive powers, samurai, ninja, bloodlusted freaks of nature with intimidating devil fruit abilities, in a world where one can become a dragon, a dinosaur, a phoenix, or even a god or deity, today we are going to talk about a simple man, a normal-sized human being who is pacifistic in nature, with no devil fruit whatsoever, and only his lesser dominant arm to carry around with him. And I'm going to tell you exactly why he is the absolute strongest in the world of One Piece. Ladies and gentlemen, today we talk about why Shanks is top 1. Yo, what's up everybody? Welcome back. It's your boy, the Nature Boy. Woo! Back with another video for you guys here today. And today we are going to be continuing the why Shanks is the strongest character in One Piece. If you have not seen part 1, go check it out. I'll leave an info card up here. It's about his character and portrayal, and I discuss why he's the strongest character through those aspects. And although you do not need to watch that one to understand this video, you can watch one or the other to get the full understanding of why I believe with very strong evidence that Shanks is the strongest active character in One Piece, with guys like Emu aside because we know nothing about them. I would recommend you watch both in their entirety to get a proper understanding. Whichever order you watch them, it does not matter. They are completely separate. They are not chronological. So today's video, we're going to be talking about one aspect of Shanks. We are going to be talking simply about his arrival at MarineFord, and I'm going to explain to you guys in depth why. Take everything else we know about Shanks aside, take away chapter 1, take away his Yonko status, take away everything else about Shanks, just his arrival at MarineFord and what it means to the story almost guarantees us, almost 100% guarantees us that he is the strongest. And I'm going to break that down in today's video. So if you guys are ready, let's get into the video. Now, if we look at One Piece, or if we look at manga and shonen manga in general, there always seems to be a pattern in how storytelling works. And even if you are unfamiliar with this pattern, subconsciously you will know about this pattern and you will see it coming based off of just previous experience. So if you've seen enough arcs in anime and in manga, even if you don't know the terms such as arcs or sagas, you will understand this subconsciously just based off of your previous experience, and you would have seen a pattern in how it always works, and you will know, okay, this is how this arc is going to work. And with that, we have, just like I mentioned, we have story arcs and we have story sagas. So a story arc is an extended or continuing storyline in narrative media such as television, comic books, comic strips, board games, video games, and films. That is the exact definition. And in anime, a story arc would be, in One Piece, for example, a story arc would be Alabasta, would be Dressrosa, would be Wano Kingdom or Wano Country, and stuff like this, or Enies Lobby, MarineFord. These would be story arcs. Now, if we look at story sagas, a saga is basically, to define this in my own terms, a story arc is in a saga, and many arcs create a saga. So, for example, the Alabasta arc is Alabasta itself. The Alabasta saga is pretty much everything from Reverse Mountain all the way up to Alabasta. And if we look at Reverse Mountain, if we look at Whiskey Peak, if we look at Drum Island, if we look at, forget what it's called, but whatever that island was where they fought Mr. 3 with the candles, and if we look at all of the smaller islands before getting to Alabasta, these aren't just random arcs. These are smaller arcs that lead up, and each of these arcs gives us an extra detail that builds up to Crocodile, builds up Baroque Works, builds up everything. So we keep learning about Baroque Works, we keep learning about the structure of how they work, we keep learning about Crocodile, we get all this lore, and with each arc we build up more and more. And in most cases, these arcs, the main villains in these smaller arcs will tend to be subordinates of the main villain that's saved for the main arc. So for example, Mr. 3 was a main villain in an arc that was a smaller arc in the entirety of the Alabasta saga, and Mr. 3 was a subordinate of Crocodile at that time. Another good example would be Caesar Clown and Doflamingo, Caesar Clown was a subordinate of Doflamingo, and Doflamingo was a subordinate of Kaido. So we keep building up, and through all these arcs, we keep hearing about Kaido. Magellan is a subordinate of the world government system itself, which were the main villains of MarineFord, where Impel Down was leading up to MarineFord. So the MarineFord saga itself would be all of the arcs leading up to MarineFord. The Alabasta saga would be all of the arcs leading up to Alabasta, and Wano would be all of the arcs leading up to Wano. So basically, an arc is one arc, and a saga is multiple arcs leading up to one big final arc, and all of it together is one saga. Usually when a saga ends, there tends to be some kind of big breather room where we find out big stuff going on in the world, and we get the Straw Hats goofing around, and we get some kind of major filler arc just to take a big breather before we get into another saga, because they tend to take years to finish. So with this being explained, I want to talk to you guys about the the Summit War Saga, and how, in my opinion, it is not only the best writing in One Piece, but it is, in my opinion, as an entire saga, the best fictional writing I have ever seen. And this is Oda at his absolute peak, and I'm going to explain to you guys why. Now, if we look at the Summit War Saga arc, this arc has been something that has been built up since the actual start of One Piece altogether. And by that I mean, the Summit War Saga concluded, it was pretty much, if we look at everything that happened between Luffy from the beginning of the series, and everything that happened with Blackbeard from the beginning of the series, there was all this tension that slowly kept building and building and building and building, and we were throwing more gas into the fire, with Blackbeard almost capturing Luffy. And then he set out to become a warlord by capturing Luffy, but instead he finds Ace, so he beats Ace, he captures Ace, and all of this stuff, it was leading to an inevitable clash between Blackbeard and Luffy. And that obviously came, even if they didn't directly clash, all hell broke loose, and we saw all of this at the end of MarineFord. And because of this, it was the only saga that I can think of in One Piece that has been built up from literally the beginning and was always building. So the way I like to look at it personally, we have our arcs and we have our sagas, but I like to look at it as pre-time skip One Piece in itself is an entire saga. And just like how sagas have little arcs and then they have a main big arc, all of the sagas pre-time skip are little arcs building up to the main arc, which is the main saga, which is the Summit War Saga arc. So pretty much all of the other arcs pre-time skip are the Whiskey Peaks, the Reverse Mountains, the Drum Islands, and then the Summit War Saga is the Alabasta, if that makes sense. That's just how I like to see it in my head canon, because it is the culmination of pretty much everything that happened pre-time skip. So if we look at the Summit War Saga itself has multiple arcs, and these arcs contain Sabaody Archipelago, Amazon Lily, Impel Down, MarineFord, and of course the post-war arc. And if we take all of these arcs away, just take them away and put them as individuals separate from the entire story, they are already, almost all of them are some of the best arcs, not just in One Piece, but in manga. However, when you put these together like a puzzle and you put them in chronological order, it is, in my opinion, the best masterpiece we have ever seen. And the whole point of the entire Summer War Saga, everything from Sabaody to the end of the ASL flashback, is to teach us one single point, one lesson through Luffy that is needed to be learned before he can continue the rest of his journey. That lesson is told to us through one single moment, one scene, at the end of the 108 long chapter Summit War Saga. And in this scene, it is hammered home 100% what that lesson is, but we're going to get to that scene later. So if we look at One Piece before the Summit War Saga and One Piece during the Summit War Saga, they are almost two different series. So if we look at before the saga, the pattern tends to be Luffy and the Straw Hats get together, there's some kind of issue, there's some kind of problem, there's some kind of big evil bad guy, And Luffy has a little bit of a problem with him, and as it goes on, he starts to struggle more and more with the villains. However, he always seems to be able to get the job done when it counts. Whether it's just being able to dig deep inside, whether it's getting help, whatever it is. We see this with Crocodile being a major obstacle. However, no matter how many times he was able to defeat Luffy, Luffy was always able to just rise back up and get the job done. We never really felt that sense of danger with Crocodile, like where Luffy was done and he could not beat him. And if we look at Enies Lobby, when Nico Robin is captured, the same thing. He is able to get the job done. Dig deep down inside, whatever it takes, get the job done. So there was always this little bit of gloomy, dark tone that gets overrushed right away with Luffy just coming in, fighting, and as long as he is strong enough and as long as he has the spirit, he can get the job done. Now, with the Summit War Saga, this entire pattern just got completely destroyed right off the gate. First arc of the Summit War Saga is the Sabaody Archipelago arc, and in that arc, we see Zoro is already hurt coming into this arc. And this arc starts off quite the opposite of the other arcs, where the other arcs start off with them having to deal with this trouble. And so it's kind of like dark almost right off the beginning, like Skypiea, Alabasta, and you got to figure out how to beat this villain. And then they beat him, and then it's happy, and there's a celebration. So it goes from sad or troublesome to get the job done to celebration. With Sabaody, we start with the celebration, where they come into this pretty much, it's like the Wonderland of One Piece, where they have all this cotton candy, these rides. They have their friends there. They have these creatures. There's these fishmen and whatnot. They're all showing them the place, and it's happy. And we get this little dark tone when we run into the Celestial Dragons real quick, and we get a quick mention of what they're like, and we continue on with the happy-go-lucky moments. And then, boom, everything hits. Luffy punches a Celestial Dragon, and Kizaru comes onto the island. And Kizaru absolutely gives us a rude awakening. Kizaru and Kuma, both. And with that scene with Kuma and Kizaru, both just absolutely leaving the Straw Hats hopeless, this was the first time in the entire series that we saw Luffy, the happy-go-lucky guy with the tough spirit who never gives up, completely tell his crew, run. We cannot defeat these guys. And this was unlike anything we've seen before. And the arc itself ends with the absolute most utter defeat that we've seen from the Straw Hats together as an entire crew, to where Kuma, one man, gets rid of all of them and separates them from each other. And Luffy is just on the ground, pounding the ground, crying, wondering why he cannot protect his friends, right before he stares Kuma in the face, completely powerless, and gets pushed away himself. And he lands on Amazon Lily. And this pattern that we see here is not just with Sabaody. This pattern continues on throughout the entire Summit War Saga, where that was only the beginning, and neither us nor Luffy knew this at the time, but he was going to go on to face a number of incredible losses coming up, to where we see him lose to Kizaru, we see him getting beat by Blackbeard, he gets beat by Magellan, absolutely gets demolished by Magellan and impaled down, and suffers probably one of his worst losses to date, to where, in my opinion, this was the most serious we have ever seen Luffy close to death, and no one has ever given us that sense of real danger and threat like Magellan did, where we knew Luffy could not touch Magellan, and he needed to get Ace and get out of there quick. And he lost to Magellan. We see him get beat by Kazan. We see him get beat by Akainu in MarineFord. And through all of this, he constantly needs the help of friends, such as he needs the help of Rayleigh, he needs the help of Hancock, he needs the help of Ivankov, he needs the help of Jinbei, Marco, Vista, Kuma, to merely keep him alive against these strong enemies. And this is seen throughout the entire saga, from Amazon Lily, Impel Down, MarineFord, Sabaody, all of it. And after so many arcs of Luffy being the bad guys and a happy ending, the stretch from Sabaody to MarineFord shows us that Luffy is still a big fish in a very, very, very small pond. And he just only started to experience the ocean. And just like with Zoro in Baratie A and his experience with Mihawk, and how Mihawk tells him, you're a frog in a well, the Summit War Saga was Luffy's frog in a well moment. It was his moment to meet, quote unquote, it was his Mihawk Baratie moment, so to speak, where Zoro got that awakening earlier on in the series. Luffy got that rude awakening in the Summit War Saga. Now, during the Summit War Saga, with Luffy, all Luffy wanted to do, as he stated many times in the saga, is to get stronger. And the reason he wanted to get stronger was to protect his friends that he cared about from stronger foes getting in the way. Guys like Kuma, who got in the way. Guys like Kizaru. Guys like Magellan. The guys like the world government who took Ace away from him. And because he was unable to do this, he wanted to get stronger so that he can never have to face these challenges again. And if we go back to a flashback in the ASL flashback, a moment there was a scene, one of my favorite scenes, where Garp is talking to Dadan and he is reminiscing about Roger. And he explains to her why he respects Roger personally, and he talks about how Roger was a kind guy, he was a laid-back guy, but if you messed with his friends, not only was he willing, but more importantly, he was able to take down anybody and everybody who tried to mess with his friends. And because he was strong enough, no one could ever touch him or his friends. And even if you mess with him, it would not have been as big of a deal as if you mess with the people he cared about. He was always able to protect the people that he cared about most. And if you mess with them, that's when you're going to see the dark side of Goldie Roger. And this is what Garp tells Dadan about Roger, and this is what he remembers the most about him after his death. Now, if we look at Luffy, Luffy keeps getting defeated by all of these guys in the entire saga, and this point was hammered home in two scenes. One of them was in MarineFord, and it was one line said by Kizaru. And if one single line summed up the lesson of the Summit War Saga, it was the line that Kizaru said to Luffy, where Luffy was down, he was hurt, he was beat up, he was tired, exhausted, he was weak, and Kizaru just walks up to him almost with a look of pity on his face, and he says, "Courage is not going to be enough. If you really want to make a stand in this world, and if you really want to protect the people that you care about, you're going to have to become much, much stronger." And then he just kicks him miles away to where Whitebeard catches him. And that right there is the lesson for Luffy to learn in this entire saga. And this is what we keep seeing Luffy fail at for the first time, and he does it over and over and over again in this saga, where it's unlike anything else we have ever seen. Now, simultaneously, in the exact same time, if we look at a different character's perspective, let's look at Koby. Koby, during the MarineFord saga, is having a lot of internal struggle, just like Garp, but in his own separate way. So we see Koby, first he has a little bit of, fear, and he's not sure if he wants to participate. He stands behind the wall, he sees Akainu kill a soldier, he's like, okay, I'm gonna fight. Him and Helmeppo are there. They are very loyal to the world government and to the Marines. They believe they are fighting for the right cause, and they are willing to fight if necessary. We even know he is willing to fight and capture Luffy if necessary. And this all goes well and all until Whitebeard is dead, Ace is dead, and the fight continues. And Koby sees Marines continue to get more and more aggressive. Rather than laying back and settling for their win, they get even more aggressive and they pursue even more. And this charge is led by Akainu as well as Kizaru and other admirals, but the hunger just becomes more and more. And with this, unfortunately, Koby has to see more and more of his allies and his respected peers in the world government and the Marines fall. And he can't help but to see all of these fathers and husbands and friends and brothers and sons dying around him in absolute vain for absolutely no necessary reason, because the fight is already over. And Koby, being the good-hearted character that he is, this hurts him deep inside. And Koby has never been a courageous character. We obviously see this from the very moment we see him with Luffy. But in this moment, Koby finally summons the courage that he needs to speak loud and to let his voice be heard. And he stands in front of an admiral, and he, although emotional and although screaming, he explains in the most logical way and in the most reasonable way that makes absolute perfect sense why, as the Marines, they should stop fighting this war. And even though everything he is saying makes perfect logical sense and would even benefit the Marines because they would save a lot of their own soldiers and they are dying for no reason, we see that he is met with no one caring about what he has to say. During the ASL flashback with Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, there was a very important scene where after Sabo's death and Ace discovers Sabo's death, he tries to run outside of the house, grab a pipe, and try and fight the people who quote-unquote killed Sabo. And Dadan takes his head and smashes it into the ground. And she brings a very good point here. And what she says here stands tall for the entire saga. Especially hits home with Koby here in this part. And she says that until you are strong, your voice does not matter. Until you are strong enough to do something about it, you don't have a voice and you don't get to do anything except sit back and accept it. And this was Koby in MarineFord in a nutshell. Just like Ace and how he was helpless to do anything about the death of Sabo, Koby, surrounded by the death and the bodies of all his comrades, because he was weak, just like Ace then, was unable to do anything about it. And just like Dadan said to Ace, because he was weak, his voice would always fall on deaf ears until he was strong enough to do something about it. His words fall on absolute deaf ears, and Akainu, after standing there for about 5 seconds listening to him, is ready to kill him, punch him, and literally get right on with what he was doing, like nothing happened. And in this moment, he is stopped by one man. He is stopped by Shanks. And right then and there, Oda, after showing us Luffy and Koby and the changes they wanted to make, threw in one character right then and there that represented both in its highest form. A character that embodied both what Luffy needed to become and what Koby needed to desperately become, all in one. A character who does not lust for battle like most, but he is strong enough to stop virtually anybody who gets in his way and tries to mess with his friends and the people who he cares about. And without needing to even fight, through simply being strong enough and with the world knowing how strong he is able to protect those he cares about without even shedding a single drop of blood. And this is Luffy's #1 reason for becoming stronger. This same character also shows us that mere seconds after Koby attempted to stop the war by standing in front of an admiral and explaining with a pure, logical, and good explanation why they should stop the war, was absolutely not listened to and was met with almost death. This character comes in, pretty much says verbatim, almost word for word, exactly what Koby said, but makes one simple difference and one change that Koby did not do. And what does he do? He pulls out his sword at the end of his explanation and says, fine. And if any of you still want to fight after what I just said, come and fight me. With him and his crew standing behind him, decked out, weapons up, ready to fight. And this is the difference. This is what Koby lacked. And this is what Shanks said. And because of this one thing, not because of the explanation he gave, that Koby gave, but because he was willing and able to back it up with his strength right then and there, he was respected by everybody, he was listened to, and nobody dared fight him. And because of that, he was able to stop the war. And through this, we understand that he is also the embodiment of Koby's #1 reason to get stronger. And in this one single appearance, by this one simple character, we are able to see why Luffy and Koby both need a time skip training arc. And more importantly, we see how the world will view them if they can get stronger. In the world of One Piece, just like in our real life world, respect comes through strength, plain and simple, above all else. And if Luffy and Koby can get stronger, they can be seen just how this character was seen and command the respect of everybody, just like he did. What we see here from Shanks is the embodiment of everything that represents what Luffy wants to become and everything that represents what Koby needs to become, all in one. So everything we see from Luffy in the Summit War Saga that he knows he is lacking, and everything we see from Koby that he knows he is lacking in MarineFord, they all appear in one simple figure in 1 or 2 chapters in one character, and that is Shanks. And another very important detail that needs to be pointed out here in regards to Shanks, if we look at an SPS, in one of the SPSs, this is canon, this is confirmed canon. It is said that, word for word, I quote, "Red hair created countless legends. Contrary to his stature, there are no pirates free like him. If we define the Pirate King as the most freest person in the seas, then we can say that Shanks is the closest to that position." So this tells us two things. First, as it says clearly, this tells us that with this definition, Shanks is the closest to Pirate King. But what this also tells us, and I'm going to have to take you guys back to another moment here to fully understand this. If we look back at a scene in Sabaody Archipelago where Rayleigh is drinking in his bar and talking to the Straw Hats for the first time and pretty much answering all their questions and telling them everything they need to know, there is one moment here where he looks Luffy dead in the eye and he asks Luffy, I forget exactly what he asked him. I think he asked him, "Do you really want to conquer the seas that bad?" Where it's pretty much a trick question, it's a test. And after a long brief moment of silence with the two just dead staring at each other, Luffy says to him, "I am not going to conquer anything. The one who is the most free is the Pirate King." And Rayleigh smiles and he sees Roger and Luffy, pretty much telling us that this is exactly what Roger said as well. And with this, we get pretty much confirmation that Luffy's number one goal in the entire series, that he says at the end of every single episode, that he says over and over and over again, he wants to become Pirate King. "My name is Monkey D. Luffy and I will become Pirate King." His number one and his sole purpose for becoming Pirate King is only so that he can become the freest man in the seas, the freest person in the seas. And because Rayleigh saw Roger through this, we can only assume that Roger's reason for this as well was to become the freest man in the seas. So their main goal for becoming King of the Pirates was to be the freest person in the seas. That is Luffy's end goal. That is what he wants more than anything. And again, we look back at this SBS and it tells us that Shanks is the current freest person in the seas. And if we look at One Piece, we always see him hanging out, having fun in different islands, doing whatever he wants, wherever he wants, with whoever he wants, and he is always having a good time. And no one seems to be able to get in his way or be an obstacle in his path or to trouble him. And if they are, he stands up. And whenever he stands up to this, he gets his way. We see this with the bandits. We see this with MarineFord. We see this with Kaido trying to arrive to MarineFord. He always gets his way whenever he wants. And when he's not involved, he's having a good time, partying, relaxing. Tell me this is not Luffy at the end of the series in a nutshell. Again, Luffy wants to become Pirate King in order to be the freest man. Shanks already is the freest man. And we know he doesn't want to become Pirate King, otherwise he would have become Pirate King at a much younger age. So this right here tells us a lot about Shanks as well. In one of my favorite scenes in the entire story of One Piece, probably my top 5 favorite scenes, honestly. This scene is in the end of the entire Summit War Saga. In the final arc, the post-war arc, in one of the final moments in this arc. We see Ace and Luffy standing facing the sea on top of the hill, crying about the death of Sabo. And Ace hits Luffy and he tells Luffy that he is never gonna die, so don't worry about losing him. And Luffy starts to cry and he breaks down and he says, and again, this is Oda after an entire Summit War Saga of dedicating it to this entire point. One last final time, he wants to absolutely hammer this point home as clear as he possibly can. And he does this by Luffy crying and saying he wants to get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and even stronger than that, so that he never has to lose anybody he cares about ever again. This is what Roger was, and this is why he went to war for his crew. And as we see with Garp talking to Dadan about Roger, even though he was probably one of his most formidable foes, Garp was able to respect and admire this one trait about Roger. And this is what Shanks shows us all in one single appearance, his most important appearance in the entire story. Who represents that figure today? Red-haired Shanks. So that's going to be the video for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's very much appreciated. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. Help me reach 100 subscribers. Leave a like if you liked it. Comment down below if you agree or if you disagree with Shanks being top 1. And with that, I'll see you guys later on this week with another banger video. Take care, guys, and I'll see you soon.